Mitrum Pty Limited is a company that sells wireless headphones in Batu. The entity is a registered VAT vendor and the financial year end is 31 December. Just by ways of a habit, this doesn't really make a huge difference in this question, but if you start making sure that you know when the financial year end of the company is, you can prevent a lot of problems. During the current financial period, the accountant erroneously recorded the advertising costs as 23,400 instead of 13,400 VAT exclusive. Now, don't worry about the VAT. The VAT has no real impact on the answer. Immediately upon the discovery of the error, the accountant informed the senior manager about the mistake. The senior manager instructed the accountant not to adjust the records. His reasoning was in the previous 2 years, the entity incurred advertising expenses equivalent to the incorrect amount recorded. So he says, don't adjust it because this is now in line with that of previous years, the wrong amount, the 23,400. If a trend analysis of the results in the different years are done, there will be no major deviations in the amount shown for the expense item. The annual turnover for the current financial period was originally estimated to be 289,530. But in actual fact, sales dropped significantly in the current financial year. So obviously the estimate was not reached. Competitors are selling a new model of wireless headphones, with the result that the demand for the older version headphone, which is sold by Mitrum, has dropped drastically. Now, here, before we get to the required part, here are a few things that should immediately sound alarm bells. The first thing is we are talking here about the conceptual framework. So obviously you're going to answer this question from the conceptual framework's point of view. But guys, as from next year, we are going to combine ethics in every single subject. So out of an ethical point of view, do you think that this guy has given the correct instruction? Do you think that he must give the instruction not to correct that figure, although he knows for a fact that that figure is wrong? So what is his reasoning behind that? His reasoning is, well, if you do a trend analysis, there's not going to be something that jumps out. So he is, obviously, his intention is to mislead the user of the financial statements. Extremely unethical. So out of an ethical perspective, this is totally wrong. Now, out of a conceptual framework perspective, we can also argue why it doesn't meet the requirements of the conceptual framework. So they wanted to write a memo to the senior manager of Mitrum in which he briefly discussed the fundamental qualitative characteristics of useful financial information as mentioned in the conceptual framework of 2018. Guys, they only ask the fundamental qualitative characteristics. They don't want the enhancing, only the fundamental. They say apply the characteristics to the scenario above and explain to him if his instruction is in contravention with the framework or not. So it's no ethical stuff. We only talk about the framework. Good. So what am I going to do? I'm going to start off my question. It's a memo to the senior manager from a student, a fundamental qualitative characteristics, and a date. And then you will have an opening paragraph. I would like to point out to you that the decision not to correct the error made in the overstatement of advertising costs is in direct contravention with the fundamental qualitative characteristics as per the conceptual framework of 2018. Now, what is the qualitative fundamental characteristics of useful financial information? Now, the first thing here is relevance. Now, remember what I've told you. When I talk about characteristics, relevance and faithful representation is different from relevance and faithful presentation when I am discussing the recognition criteria of an element. That is also relevance and faithful representation, but coming from a different angle. So under the characteristics, the fundamental qualitative characteristics, what does relevance mean? Now, relevance means that relevant information is capable to make a difference in the decisions taken by the users of the financial information. That will happen if the information has predictive value or confirmatory value or both. Now, what does predictive value mean? Predictive value says I'm going to take trends from the past and I'm going to escalate it in the future and I'm going to make a decision. So in this scenario, a trend analysis on the advertising costs are performed because it is a significant cost incurred by the entity which has a direct impact on the future profitability of the entity. If you look at the estimated turnover figure, which is now in actual fact much lower than that figure, and you look at the advertising cost as a percentage of that figure, then you will see that advertising cost is a material amount. So therefore, it's going to have a material impact on the profitability of this entity. So therefore, that figure, it is of vital importance that that figure is 100% correct. The trend analysis will have predictive value in the sense that the correlation between the cost and the revenue can be used to predict future profitability. And it has confirmatory value in the sense that it will confirm that the correlation between the cost and the revenue delivered the same results as in the past. Now, it is exactly as a result of this that the guy wants to manipulate the figure. Because if he's going to show the correct figure, suddenly you won't have a trend that's going to move like that or like that. Suddenly you're going to have this. It's lower than usual, eh? So usually it was there, and currently in this year it will drop down. Now the question is why. Now listen to the type of cost that we're talking about. We talk about advertising costs. Now, isn't there in any event a direct correlation between advertising costs and sales revenue? Yeah, of course there must be, guys, because it all depends. The more I'm going to spend on advertising, the more my sales are going to increase. So that is definitely a trend that the reader of the financial statement is going to look at. Okay. Then, materiality. So under relevance, we also have this whole question of materiality. We say that the non-disclosure of the 10,000 Rand, that's the difference between the wrong figure and the right figure, is a material figure, meaning that it could influence the decisions of the users of financial statements. The amount can be considered as material because the mistake as a percentage of the estimated turnover, that is the original amount, is already 3.5%. Considering that the actual turnover was much lower than the estimated 289,530, it means that the percentage in actual fact was much higher than the original 3.5% and therefore became even more material. Then the second thing is faithful representation. This means that financial information must be complete, neutral, and free from error. In the scenario, the information disclosed is not neutral. Why? Because the senior manager wants to manipulate the figures and he doesn't want to show any deviations in the trend analysis. It is for sure not free from error because there was an obvious mistake made of 10,000 Rand. And the statements are not complete either because of that. Now, if you didn't mention this at this stage, it's fine. But if you're not going to mention this by the time you're going to write your class test 1, it is not fine. You will see that you can claim that on all expenses that you actually incur. So if he has stated in his books that his advertising cost was 23,400, he has claimed 15% VAT on the 23,400 from the receiver of revenue incorrectly. So if he doesn't rectify that figure and pay the receiver of revenue back for that VAT that he has claimed incorrectly, it means that he stole money from the receiver of revenue. Now, over and above the fact that that is not right, it is morally and ethically also a problem, because I think you should fire this guy, because obviously his morals and his ethics is not what you expect from a financial manager. And then you will close off, yours sincerely, a student.